The only thing more dangerous than Junho's business acumen was the way he could silence a room simply by breathing. The first time his new assistant, Chloe Smith, accidentally spilled coffee on his suit, he didn't fire her. He just looked at her with the chilling calm of a predator and said, "A mistake is only fatal if you run from it." 2 years later, Chloe hadn't run. She had perfected the art of invisibility, moving through the gleaming, ice-cold corridors of Kim Enterprises like a ghost. Her world was a study in controlled chaos, a symphony of scheduling, filtering, and anticipating the needs of the most formidable man in Seoul. Her small desk, positioned just outside the cavernous expanse of his office, was a sanctuary of order, a stark contrast to the storm that was her boss. Junho's office was a glass-walled fortress overlooking the Han River, a monument to power and precision. Everything was sharp angles, cool marble, and minimalist art, reflecting the man himself, devastatingly handsome, ruthlessly intelligent, and emotionally impenetrable. At 28, he was the prodigy CEO who had taken his family's company global, a fact that bred not arrogance, but a constant, simmering intensity. Chloe, at 25, was his perfect counterbalance. Where he was storm clouds and thunder, she was quiet dawn and steady rain. She kept her head down, her heart shielded, and her feelings for him locked in a vault buried so deep within her soul she almost believed they didn't exist. Almost. It was the little things that betrayed her. The way her breath hitched when his scent of clean cotton and rain-soaked pavement wafted past her desk. The way her fingers would tremble slightly when she handed him his morning espresso, their touch never quite meeting. The way she could feel the weight of his gaze on her back, a physical pressure that made her skin prickle, even when she was staring intently at her screen. Today was the annual board review, a day that crackled with a unique kind of tension. The air in the high-rise was thin and electric. Chloe had been at her post since 5 a.m., ensuring every report was flawless, every presentation seamless. The door to his office hissed open, and Junho emerged, a dark silhouette against the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was adjusting the cufflinks of his impeccably tailored black suit, his jaw set, his eyes, the color of dark roasted coffee, scanning the room and landing on her. The quarterly projections, Chloe. His voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the marble floor and up through the soles of her feet. "Ready for you, sir." She stood, her knees annoyingly weak, and handed him the tablet. As he took it, his fingers brushed against hers. A jolt, sharp and hot, shot up her arm. It was nothing. It was everything. She snatched her hand back as if burned, her eyes flying to his. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in the depths of his gaze. Not annoyance. Not indifference. It was something darker, more intense, a spark of awareness that stripped away the professional veneer and saw right through to the frantic beating of her heart. It was gone so quickly she thought she'd imagined it. "The car is downstairs," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't move. He just stood there, looking down at her, his presence an overwhelming force. "You've done well this morning," he said, the praise feeling more intimate than any touch. "It hasn't gone unnoticed." Before she could formulate a response, he turned and strode toward the elevator, his long coat flowing behind him. The elevator doors slid open, and he stepped inside without looking back. As the polished steel doors closed, sealing him away, Chloe finally allowed herself to exhale, her body slumping against her desk. She looked down at her hand, the skin where he'd touched her still tingling with a phantom heat. She had built walls around her heart for 2 years, brick by careful brick. But in that single, fleeting touch, she felt the first crack begin to form. And as she stood there, trying to steady her racing pulse, her phone buzzed with a single, terse message from the man who had just shattered her composure without even trying. The message read, "Cancel my evening. I have a different engagement. And Chloe, be ready to work late tonight." The message burned in her palm, the words "work late tonight" echoing in the silent, empty office. Chloe stared at her phone, the sterile glow of the screen illuminating her face in the deepening twilight. Work late. It was a common enough request, a standard part of her job description. But the way he had said it, the lingering look, the accidental touch, It had transformed the simple phrase into something laden with unspoken meaning. For the next few hours, she moved through her tasks like an automaton. The board meeting would be a grueling, all-day affair, a high-stakes battle of egos and balance sheets where Jun-ho was both king and gladiator. She imagined him in the opulent conference room on the top floor, his posture rigid, his voice cutting through corporate platitudes with surgical precision. He was in his element, a world away from the quiet tension of their morning encounter. To keep her mind occupied, she began compiling the post-meeting reports he would demand first thing tomorrow. As she pulled a file from the bottom drawer of his desk, a drawer only she was permitted to access, a small, worn photograph fluttered to the floor. It was a picture of a much younger Jun-ho, perhaps 18, his arms slung around the shoulders of a smiling young woman with kind eyes. They stood in front of a small, humble-looking restaurant, not the glittering skyscrapers of Seoul. This was a Jun-ho she had never seen. The sharp edges of the CEO were softened into the gentle lines of a boy, his smile easy and unguarded. The woman, who was she? A first love? A sister? The vulnerability in his youthful face was a sucker punch to Chloe's heart. This was the man beneath the empire. The man he kept hidden from the world. She quickly slipped the photo back into the file, her fingers trembling. She had seen a secret, a crack in his formidable armor, and the intimacy of it left her breathless. The sun had long since set, painting the city in a tapestry of neon and shadow, when the soft ping of the private elevator announced his return. Chloe's heart leapt into her throat. She quickly stood, smoothing her pencil skirt, her posture rigidly professional. Jun-ho stepped out, and the very air in the room shifted. The boardroom had left its mark on him. His tie was loosened, the top button of his crisp white shirt undone, and a faint weariness clung to the set of his shoulders. But his eyes were alive with a sharp, restless energy. They found her immediately, pinning her in place. "The board is handled," he stated, his voice a low thrum that filled the spacious office. He didn't break his gaze as he walked toward her, dropping his portfolio onto her desk with a soft thud. The scent of him, rain and clean, male skin, wrapped around her. "I'm glad to hear it, sir," she said, her voice thankfully steady. "The preliminary reports are already compiled." He stopped mere feet from her, close enough for her to see the flecks of silver in his dark eyes. "Forget the reports." A beat of silence stretched between them, taut and electric. The only sound was the distant hum of the city below. "I've been in a room full of sharks all day, Chloe," he said, his voice dropping, becoming almost conversational, yet it held an undercurrent that made her skin heat. "All posturing and greed. It's tedious." He took another step, closing the distance. He was so close now she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jawline, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "But you," he continued, his eyes tracing the line of her cheekbone, then dipping to her lips for a heartbeat before meeting her gaze again. "You are the only person in this entire building who doesn't want something from me." His words were a confession and an accusation all at once. They stripped away every pretense, every professional boundary. Chloe's breath caught. She could only stare back, trapped in the intensity of his look. He reached out, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he would touch her face. But his hand moved past her, his fingers brushing against the sleeve of her blouse as he picked up a stray pen from her desk. The contact was deliberate, searing. "The late work I mentioned," he said, his voice now a whisper that feathered against her skin. "It requires a change of venue. We're leaving the office." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked towards the elevator, pressing the call button. The doors slid open immediately. "Come, Chloe," he said, not looking back, his command leaving no room for refusal. Frozen for a moment, her mind raced. Leaving the office? To go where? His home? A restaurant? This was uncharted, dangerous territory. Every sensible instinct told her to make an excuse, to run. But the memory of the boy in the photograph, and the raw, unguarded look in the man's eyes just now, pulled her forward. She grabbed her purse and followed him into the elevator. The doors closed, enclosing them in a silent, mirrored box. He stood beside her, his reflection watching her, a silent predator and his mesmerized prey. She watched the numbers above the door descend, her future hurtling toward her with every floor they passed. The elevator didn't descend to the bustling, public lobby. Instead, it silently ascended, the digital display flashing a single, terrifying, thrilling destination: Penthouse. The soft ding was a death knell to her professional composure. Penthouse. The doors slid open not into a public hallway, but directly into a private foyer of breathtaking scale and silence. Chloe's feet felt rooted to the polished elevator floor. This wasn't just a change of venue, it was a crossing of a sacred threshold. Junho stepped out, his movements fluid and assured, as if her presence in his most private sanctuary was a foregone conclusion. He shrugged off his suit jacket, tossing it casually over the back of a minimalist sofa that probably cost more than her annual salary. "Are you planning to conduct our business from the elevator, Chloe?" His voice, laced with a subtle, teasing edge, echoed in the vast, open space. That broke the spell. She forced her legs to move, stepping onto the cool, dark hardwood floor. The elevator doors whispered shut behind her, sealing her in. The air was different here, cool, filtered, and carrying the distinct, clean scent of him, sandalwood and something uniquely masculine. It was intoxicating. I wasn't aware we had business that required your private residence, sir," she said, her voice sounding small in the cavernous room. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "There are some matters too sensitive for the office. Where the walls have ears." Her mind raced. Corporate espionage? A secret merger? But his eyes, dark and intent, told her the sensitive matter was not in a file. It was standing in his foyer, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sit," he commanded softly, gesturing to the sprawling sofa. She moved as if in a dream, perching on the very edge of the cushion. The penthouse was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a dizzying, panoramic view of Seoul's glittering skyline. It was powerful and lonely, a perfect reflection of the man himself. Instead of joining her, he walked to a sleek, hidden bar. The clink of crystal was loud in the silence. He poured 2 glasses of a rich, amber whiskey and brought one over to her. His fingers brushed against hers as she took the heavy crystal tumbler, another deliberate, electric shock. "To a successful board meeting," he said, his gaze holding hers as he took a slow sip. She mimicked the gesture, the whiskey burning a warm, welcome path down her throat, steadying her nerves. "It was a masterclass, sir. You had them all in the palm of your hand." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Did I?" He set his glass down on a low marble table and began to slowly pace before her, a panther circling its quarry. "Power is an illusion, Chloe. It's a performance. They see the suit, the title, the unshakable confidence. They don't see the cost." He stopped his pacing and looked directly at her, his gaze piercing. "You see it, though, don't you?" She couldn't lie. "Not here. Not now." She gave a barely perceptible nod. "That photo you found today," he said, his voice dropping, and Chloe's blood ran cold. He had known. Of course he had known. Her name was Sujin. "My sister." The confession hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Chloe's breath caught. The kind-eyed girl in the photograph. She believed in this company when it was just a dream my father had. She never got to see any of this. He gestured vaguely at the magnificent view, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard from him before: grief. "Sometimes, all of this, it feels like a monument I'm building for a ghost." In that moment, the mighty CEO was gone. In his place was just a man, haunted and heartbreakingly human. The last of Chloe's defenses crumbled. She saw the weight he carried, the isolation at the top. And she saw, with startling clarity, that he had chosen her to see it. He moved then, closing the distance between them in 2 swift strides. He didn't sit. He simply looked down at her, his expression a turbulent mix of longing and conflict. "For 2 years, you have been the only constant, the only real thing in this gilded cage of mine," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Your quiet strength, your loyalty. It's a light in all this darkness, Chloe. And I find myself gravitating toward it, more and more each day. He reached out, his fingers hovering just beside her cheek, so close she could feel their heat. Her entire world had narrowed to this man, this moment, this suspended, breathless anticipation. She leaned imperceptibly into the space where his touch would be, her answer given without a single word. Just as his fingers were about to finally make contact with her skin, a sharp, insistent buzz shattered the moment. The intercom. Junho's head snapped up, his face hardening into its familiar mask of impenetrable control. A voice, crisp and formal, crackled through the speaker. "Mr. Kim, your fiancé is here to see you." The word hung in the air, sharp and toxic. Fiancé. It was a bucket of ice water thrown on the smoldering embers of the moment. Junho's face, which had been an open wound of vulnerability just seconds before, shut down completely. The mask of the unapproachable CEO was back, slotted into place with an almost audible click. He didn't look at Chloe. His gaze was fixed on the intercom panel, his jaw a hard line. "Tell her I'm in a critical meeting," he said, his voice stripped of all the warmth it had held moments ago, now cold and businesslike. The silence that followed was heavier than before, polluted by the ghost of that uninvited title. Fiancé. Chloe felt the single word reverberate through her, shattering the beautiful, fragile intimacy they had built. She stood up abruptly, her legs unsteady. The warmth of the whiskey in her stomach had turned to lead. "I should go," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She needed to escape, to process this seismic betrayal. He had a fiancée, and he had brought her here, to his home, and spoken to her of ghosts and light. "Sit down, Chloe." The command was quiet, but absolute. It was not the voice of the vulnerable man, but the CEO. The man who was used to being obeyed. She stood her ground, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. "Sir, with all due respect, this is no longer appropriate." Finally, he turned to look at her. The conflict in his eyes was gone, replaced by a stormy, determined intensity. "What you think is appropriate and what I need are two very different things right now." He took a step toward her. "The woman at the door is Park Ji-hye. Our engagement is a business arrangement, a merger between her family's corporation and mine. It was orchestrated by my father on his deathbed. It is a contract. It is not my heart." The explanation was brutal in its clarity. A corporate merger. A contract. It should have made her feel better. It didn't. It only made the entire situation feel more gilded and corrupt. "And what is this, then?" Chloe gestured between them, her voice gaining strength, fueled by a surge of hurt and anger. "Is this another business arrangement? Am I just late-night work?" His eyes flashed, a spark of the predator re-emerging. "You know you are not." "Do I?" she shot back, her professional facade finally, completely crumbling. "For 2 years, I have been your assistant. Nothing more. And then tonight, you bring me here, you show me a piece of your soul. You look at me like that. And you expect me to simply ignore the fact that you have a fiancé waiting downstairs." She moved to walk past him, toward the elevator, but he was faster. His hand shot out, not to grab her, but to press against the doorframe, blocking her path. He caged her in, his body a wall of heat and tension, so close she could see the rapid pulse at the base of his throat. "I expect you to listen," he said, his voice low and urgent, his breath ghosting across her lips. "I expect you to understand that the man trapped by that contract is not the man standing in front of you right now. The man in front of you has spent 2 years watching you, respecting you, wanting you. And tonight, I am done fighting it." His confession was a wildfire, scorching everything in its path. "Wanting you." The words were a physical touch, searing and undeniable. All the stolen glances, the lingering touches, the intense focus, it all clicked into a devastating, terrifying picture. Chloe looked up at him, her resolve crumbling under the weight of his gaze and his words. The anger bled away, leaving only a raw, aching want. He was a forbidden fruit, a king in a gilded cage, and he was offering her the key. He slowly lowered his arm from the doorframe, his eyes never leaving hers. The choice was hers now. Stay and cross a line from which there was no return, or leave and forever wonder what might have been in this penthouse in the sky. Her phone, still clutched in her trembling hand, vibrated loudly, shattering the tense silence for the second time that night. The screen lit up, revealing a name that sent a fresh wave of dread through her veins. It was her brother, and he only ever called this late when something was terribly wrong. The universe, it seemed, was determined to keep them apart. Chloe stared at her brother's name flashing on her screen, a cold dread washing over the heated desire of moments before. Two worlds were colliding violently inside her, the intoxicating, forbidden temptation of Junho and the stark, familiar responsibility of her family. I have to take this, she stammered, her voice shaky. It's my brother. Junho's expression was unreadable, the raw hunger in his eyes banked by this new, unwelcome intrusion. He gave a tight, single nod, stepping back to give her space. The distance felt like a chasm. She accepted the call, turning slightly away from him. Mark? What's wrong? Chloe, thank God. Her brother's voice was strained, thick with a panic she recognized instantly. It's Mom. She's had a fall. The hospital just called. They're running tests, but it sounds bad. I'm on my way there now. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Her mother. Her rock. The world narrowed to a single, terrifying point. Which hospital? She asked, her voice miraculously steady even as her hands trembled. He gave her the name. It was a 30-minute drive without traffic. In the rain now sheeting against the penthouse windows, it would be twice that. I'm on my way. I'll be there as soon as I can. She ended the call, her mind already racing, calculating the quickest route, the logistics. The passionate, cinematic tension of moments ago was gone, replaced by the gritty, frightening reality of life. She turned back to Junho. The storm in his eyes had been replaced by something else, sharp, focused concern. He had heard enough. My mother, she said, the words feeling inadequate. She's in the hospital. Where? He asked, his tone all business, but his gaze was soft, searching her face. She told him. Without another word, he strode to his desk, picked up a different, sleek black phone, and pressed a single button. Bring the car to the private penthouse entrance. Now. He paused, listening. No. The Maybach. And clear a route to Seoul General. A medical emergency. He hung up and turned to her. My driver will take you. He'll use the diplomatic corridors. You'll bypass the traffic. The offer was so immense, so effortlessly powerful, it left her speechless. He wasn't asking. He was commanding his resources to serve her. In her moment of crisis, he was her fortress. Sir, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask, he cut her off, his voice leaving no room for argument. He walked to her, stopping close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the genuine worry etched there. Go. Be with your family. He reached out, and this time, his touch was not a searing, possessive brand, but a grounding, comforting pressure on her arm. Call me. Let me know she's all right. Tears, held back by sheer will, pricked at the corners of her eyes. This side of him, the protector, the man who saw her pain and acted without hesitation, was more dangerous to her heart than the seductive CEO could ever be. It made him real. It made her feelings for him undeniable. Thank you, she whispered, the words laden with a gratitude that went far beyond the car ride. He simply nodded, his hand dropping from her arm. The elevator doors, as if on a silent command, slid open. The luxurious interior of the private lift awaited, a chariot to whisk her away from this dream and back to her reality. She stepped inside, turning to face him as the doors began to close. He stood in the center of his magnificent, lonely penthouse, a king in his empty castle, his gaze locked on hers until the very last second. The descent was a blur. The lobby was empty, silent. A uniformed driver stood holding the door of a majestic, black Maybach, its engine a quiet purr. As she slid into the impossibly soft leather seat, the partition window slid down slightly. "Do not worry, Miss Smith," the driver said calmly. "Mr. Kim has made all the necessary calls. We will have you there in 15 minutes. As the car pulled smoothly away from the curb, slicing through the rain-soaked streets with an otherworldly ease, Chloe leaned her head back, her mind a whirlwind of fear for her mother and the haunting image of Junho's face. He had wielded his power not for profit, but for her. In her moment of greatest need, he had been her unwavering shield. But as the city lights streaked past the window, a chilling thought insinuated itself into her worry. His command to the driver had been specific, his knowledge of the city's secret routes absolute. It was a display of power that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The question now wasn't just if her mother would be okay, but what else Junho Kim was capable of when someone he wanted was in trouble. The hospital was a stark, fluorescent-lit universe away from the rain-slicked glamour of Junho's penthouse. The scent of antiseptic replaced sandalwood, the beeping of monitors a harsh substitute for the quiet hum of power. Chloe found her brother, Mark, in the waiting room, his face pale and etched with worry. He pulled her into a tight hug. "She's stable," he said, the words releasing a tidal wave of relief that made her knees weak. "Broken wrist, a nasty concussion. They're keeping her overnight for observation. She's sleeping now." The drive, a surreal, high-speed glide through cleared corridors, had felt like an out-of-body experience. Now, the reality of the stark white walls and the lingering fear grounded her. She sat beside Mark, her hand still tingling from where Junho had held her. "How did you get here so fast?" Mark asked, frowning. "In this rain, I thought you'd be another hour at least." "My boss," Chloe said, the word feeling entirely inadequate. "He arranged for a car." Mark's eyebrows shot up. "Your boss? The scary Korean CEO you're always complaining works you to the bone? He sent a car." Before she could formulate an answer, her phone vibrated in her clutch. A text. Her heart stuttered, knowing who it was before she even looked. "Junho, is she all right?" 2 text bubbles appeared, then disappeared, as if he was wrestling with what to say. Then, a second message followed. "Junho, do you need anything?" Simple. Direct. Yet the concern woven through those 6 words was more potent than any flowery sentiment. He wasn't asking as her CEO. He was asking as a man who cared. "Chloe, she's stable. Sleeping. Thank you for the car." It made all the difference. She hesitated, her thumbs hovering over the screen. The professional in her screamed to stop, but the woman who had been in his penthouse, who had felt his breath on her lips, won out. "Chloe, I don't know how to thank you." The response was immediate. "Junho, there is no need. Your family's well-being is the only priority." A moment passed, the 3 dancing dots appearing once more. Chloe held her breath. "Junho, when you are ready to return to work, let me know. I will send the car." It was a command, yet it felt like a caress. "When you are ready." He was giving her space, acknowledging her life outside of him. It was a level of consideration she had never expected. "Is that him?" Mark asked, his voice low. Chloe simply nodded, slipping her phone away, a secret, warm glow spreading through her chest despite the sterile cold of the hospital. She stayed for hours, until the doctors assured them their mother was resting comfortably and they should go home and get some sleep. Mark drove her back to her small, cozy apartment, the normalcy of it a sharp contrast to the night's events. As she unlocked her door, the silence of her home enveloped her. She shrugged off her coat, the expensive fabric a reminder of the suit she had chosen so carefully for a night that had spiraled into chaos. She could still smell the faint, lingering trace of Junho's cologne on her blouse from when he had stood so close. She was exhausted, her body and mind stretched thin. But as she crawled into bed, her phone was the last thing she looked at. There were no new messages. The conversation had ended with his offer of the car. It felt unfinished. Closing her eyes, she didn't see the hospital room or her brother's worried face. She saw Junho, standing in his penthouse, the city at his feet, his gaze holding hers with a possessive, unspoken promise. He had a fiancée. He was a king in a gilded cage. And tonight, he had shown her that the key he offered wasn't just to his world, but to his heart. Sleep finally claimed her, but it was fitful, filled with dreams of stormy eyes and the echo of a promise. She was jolted awake hours later by the shrill ring of her landline, a sound that never meant good news. She fumbled for the receiver, her heart in her throat. "Hello." A smooth, unfamiliar female voice, cultured and cold, spoke on the other end. "Miss Smith? This is Park Ji-hye, Jun-ho's fiancé. I think it's time you and I had a talk." The name was a splash of ice water on the lingering warmth of her dreams. Park Ji-hye, Jun-ho's fiancé. The woman from the intercom. Chloe sat bolt upright in bed, the early morning light feeling suddenly harsh and accusatory. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. How did she get this number? Why was she calling? "Miss Smith?" the voice repeated, smooth as polished glass and just as cold. "I assume you can hear me." Yes, Chloe managed, her voice rough with sleep and shock. "How did you get this number?" A soft, humorless laugh trickled through the receiver. "Please. That's a question for a naive little girl. Not for the woman who was in my fiancé's penthouse until midnight last night. I know everything I need to know about you, Chloe Smith. Your employment history, your family, your mother's unfortunate accident." The threat was veiled in silk, but it was unmistakable. She had done her homework. The violation was profound, leaving Chloe feeling exposed and filthy. "It was a business meeting," Chloe stated, forcing a steel into her voice that she didn't feel. It was the flimsy shield of her professionalism, and they both knew it. "Business meetings do not typically involve my fiancé clearing city traffic for his assistant," Ji-hye countered, her tone dripping with disdain. "Let's not insult each other's intelligence. I am not a villain in one of your dramatic novels. I am a practical woman. Our families have merged fortunes. This engagement is the seal on that merger. It is non-negotiable." Chloe's knuckles were white around the receiver. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand the game you are playing," Ji-hye said, her voice lowering, becoming deadly serious. "You see a powerful, handsome man and you think this is a romance. It is not. This is business. And if you become a problem for this business, you will be removed. Not by me, necessarily, but by the inexorable machinery of the world Jun-ho and I inhabit. You will be crushed, and your family along with you. Your mother's recovery will be the least of your worries." The words were delivered with such calm, chilling certainty that Chloe felt a genuine fear coil in her stomach. This wasn't a jealous lover. This was a corporate raider defending her asset. "He doesn't love you," Chloe whispered, the words a desperate, final defense. The silence on the other end was longer this time, more considering. "Love," Ji-hye finally said, and for the first time, a sliver of genuine emotion, pity, colored her voice. "You really are a child. Love is the least important currency in our world. Now, I am giving you a choice. A graceful exit. Resign. Take a position at one of our overseas subsidiaries. A very generous severance will be deposited into your account, enough to ensure your mother has the best care. This is my only offer." The ultimatum hung in the air, a poisoned chalice. Safety for her family, financial security, in exchange for disappearing from Jun-ho's life forever. It was the sensible choice. The safe choice. "Go to hell," Chloe said, her voice trembling but clear. She heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. The civility evaporated. "Then you have chosen your path," Park Ji-hye said, her voice now as sharp as a shard of ice. "Don't say I didn't warn you." The line went dead. Chloe sat there, shaking, the dial tone buzzing in her ear like a trapped insect. The warmth and safety of her apartment was gone, replaced by a battlefield. Park Ji-hye had drawn a line in the sand, and Chloe had just crossed it. She had chosen Jun-ho. She had chosen the storm. But as she hugged her knees to her chest, The fear began to solidify into a cold, hard resolve. Park Ji-hye saw her as a problem to be managed. A naive girl playing with fire. She had no idea that the quiet, obedient assistant had just decided to fight for her king. And as the morning sun streamed into her window, Chloe picked up her phone, her thumb hovering over Junho's number. She would not run. She would not hide. She would go to him, tell him everything. But as she went to press call, her screen lit up with a news alert from a major financial outlet. The headline made her blood run cold. Insider trading scandal rocks Kim Enterprises. CEO's inner circle under investigation. And the article featured a grainy, clandestine photo of her, Chloe Smith, leaving Junho's penthouse. The world had caught fire, and Chloe was at the center of the blaze. The article was everywhere. The grainy photo of her leaving the penthouse was captioned with venomous speculation. Her phone exploded with calls from unknown numbers and texts from concerned colleagues. Mark's voice was a frantic mix of confusion and panic on her voicemail. This was Park Ji-hye's first move. Not a subtle threat, but a nuclear strike. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Smith? There are individuals here from the company's legal department. They are insisting." Her personal cell rang. A private number. She answered. "Chloe." It was him. Junho. His voice was a low, dangerous thunder. A fury so immense it was chilling. "Do not speak to them. Do not open your door. They are the board's attack dogs." "Junho, the photo, they think I know the truth." He cut her off, the words sharp and final. "And I know what they are. They are vultures circling the only thing in my life that is real." She heard the roar of a car engine. "I am 5 minutes away. The moment you see my car, you walk out and you get in." The command was a lifeline. He was coming for her. Personally. The 5 minutes were an eternity. Peering through the blinds, she saw the two men in severe suits. Then, a low-slung, gunmetal grey Aston Martin pulled up with predatory grace. Junho emerged, not in a suit, but in dark, casual clothes that made him look more like a warrior than a CEO. His gaze found her window instantly. Chloe grabbed her purse and walked out. She pushed through the main door. The officers stepped forward. Junho moved, a blur of controlled motion, placing his body between her and them. He didn't look at them. His eyes, blazing with a possessive fire, were only for her. He simply took her hand, his grip firm and unbreakable. "She is with me," he stated, the words a law unto themselves. He led her to the car, a silent, powerful shield. Inside, the engine growled. He looked at her, pulling off his sunglasses. The fury in his eyes was now mixed with something else, a terrifying, exhilarating triumph. "They tried to use you," he said, pulling away. "They saw your light and tried to snuff it out. That ends now." He drove them not to the office, but back to the penthouse. The ascent in the elevator was silent, charged with the energy of a battlefield after the storm. The doors opened to the magnificent space, now feeling like a conquered fortress. He didn't stride toward her. He turned, his back to the panoramic city view, and simply looked at her. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a profound, earth-shattering calm. "For 2 years," he began, his voice quiet but echoing in the vast space, "I have lived in a world of contracts and calculations. My father's legacy. My fiancé's merger. A life built on cold, hard facts." He took a single step toward her. "And then there is you. You are not a fact, Chloe. You are a feeling. A feeling that has become the only truth I recognize." He closed the remaining distance, but slowly, reverently. He didn't touch her face. Instead, his fingers found hers, lacing through them, his thumb stroking the back of her hand in a gesture so intimate it stole her breath. "I brought you here last night to confess a weakness. To tell you I was drawn to you." His eyes held hers, dark and unguarded. "But I was wrong. It is not a weakness. It is my only strength. And I am done conceding you to their games. I am done pretending you are just my assistant." He brought their joined hands to his chest, pressing her palm against the fierce, rapid beating of his heart. The board, the scandal, the fiancé, let them all burn, he whispered, his voice dropping to a raw, hushed vow. There is only one thing I want to make irrevocably, undeniably clear. He leaned in, his lips a breath from hers, his gaze holding her captive. Tonight, you will become my woman. The words were not a question. They were a declaration, a fundamental rewriting of their universe. Tonight, you will become my woman. They hung in the air between them, not as a demand, but as a raw, breathtaking truth finally spoken aloud. For a heartbeat, there was only silence, thick with the weight of everything they had denied for 2 years. Chloe could feel the hard, frantic beat of his heart beneath her palm, a wild drum matching the rhythm of her own. The scandal, the threats, the world outside this glass fortress, it all faded into a distant, meaningless hum. There was only him, the fire in his eyes, the certainty in his touch. Slowly, never breaking their gaze, Junho raised his other hand. He didn't grab or pull. He simply cradled the side of her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone with a reverence that made her want to weep. His touch was a question, a plea, and a promise all at once. No more shadows, Chloe, he whispered, his voice a ragged breath against her lips. No more stolen glances across a boardroom. Just this. And then, he closed the infinitesimal distance. The kiss was not gentle. It was a conflagration. It was the devastating release of 2 years of pent-up longing, a collision of soul-deep hunger and overwhelming relief. His lips were firm and possessive, moving against hers with a desperate intensity that stole the air from her lungs. It was a kiss that laid claim, that seared away every doubt, every fear, every name except his. Chloe's hands slid from his chest to his shoulders, her fingers curling into the soft wool of his sweater, anchoring herself as the world tilted on its axis. She kissed him back with everything she had, with all the silent love and fierce loyalty she had locked away. It was an answer, a surrender, and a claiming of her own. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, their foreheads rested together. The city lights glittered around them, mere spectators to a revolution happening in the sky. They will come for us tomorrow, Junho murmured, his voice rough with emotion, his hands framing her face as if she were the most precious thing he had ever held. Let them, Chloe breathed, her own voice surprisingly steady. Her eyes met his, no longer the hesitant assistant, but a woman who had chosen her king and her war. I'm not running. A slow, genuine smile, the first one she had ever seen that reached his eyes, transformed his face. It was breathtaking. Then we faced them together. He swept her into his arms, not as a CEO with his assistant, but as a man with the woman he loved. He carried her through the penthouse, away from the view, away from the world, into the shadows of his private sanctuary. The rest of the night was a blur of sensation, of whispered confessions against warm skin, of tender touches that mapped new territories, of a union that felt less like a beginning and more like a homecoming. It was passionate and slow, frantic and gentle, a symphony of two souls finally, completely, becoming one. As dawn began to paint the sky in hues of rose and gold, Chloe lay curled against his side, her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. His arm was wrapped around her, holding her close, as if he would never let go. He pressed a kiss to her hair. When the sun rises, he said, his voice a quiet rumble in his chest, I end this. Publicly. For us. She tilted her head back to look at him. There will be a price. Let them try to collect. His fingers traced a lazy pattern on her bare shoulder. I have spent my life building an empire for a ghost. Today, I start building a life for us. The sun rose, full and brilliant. And true to his word, he acted. From the very penthouse where they had found each other, he made 2 calls. The first was to his lawyer, initiating the immediate and formal dissolution of his engagement contract with Park Ji-hye, citing irreconcilable differences and a clear conflict of interest. The second was to the board, a conference call where his voice, calm and absolute, did not ask for permission, but stated his new reality. Chloe, wrapped in his robe, listened from the doorway. She heard the cold fury of the board, the threats. But she also heard something new in Junho's voice. Not the cold CEO, but a man with everything to gain. An hour later, a press release went out. It was a masterstroke. It did not deny the photo. It confirmed a deep, committed relationship with his longtime assistant, Chloe, and announced the mutual termination of the Park merger, framing it as a strategic shift toward more innovative, global partnerships. It was bold, it was scandalous, and it was utterly brilliant. He had taken their weapon and reforged it into a shield. The headlines that morning were chaotic, but they were not about his downfall. They were about his audacity. The stock price dipped, then stabilized. The world held its breath. Weeks later, the dust began to settle. Junho, with Chloe not as his assistant but as his strategic advisor by his side, unveiled a bold new company direction that excited investors more than any stale merger ever could. Park Ji-hye, outmaneuvered and publicly humiliated, faded from the scene, her threat extinguished not by force, but by a superior strategy, the undeniable power of a united front. One evening, standing on the penthouse terrace where their new life had begun, Junho turned to Chloe. The city was laid out at their feet, not as a prize he had almost lost, but as a testament to what they had built together. "I told you that night you would become my woman," he said, taking her hand. A small, black velvet box was in his palm. He opened it, not to a ring, but to a simple, elegant key. "It was the truest thing I have ever said, but it was only half of the truth." He placed the key in her hand, closing her fingers over it. "This is the master key to this penthouse, to my office, to every door in my life. The other half of the truth, Chloe, is that on that night, I became your man. Completely, irrevocably." Tears of pure, unshadowed joy welled in Chloe's eyes as she looked from the key to the man she loved. The struggle was over. The war was won. They had not lost everything. They had gained it all. He smiled, that true, breathtaking smile that was only for her. "So, Chloe," he whispered, his voice full of love and promise, "shall we begin?" And so, beneath the glittering lights of Seoul, two hearts forged in silence finally found their voice. The CEO and his assistant chose each other, and in doing so, found not an ending, but a perfect beginning. If this story of forbidden attraction and triumphant love captured your heart, we invite you to subscribe for more cinematic romances. If you enjoyed it, please like and share this story with someone who believes in destiny. We would love to hear from you. What was the moment that made your heart beat faster? This has been, Tonight, You Will Become My Woman. Thank you for listening.